So we're really delighted to have you here, Benedict, and we're looking forward to your comments.
Your Holiness, learned and old friends in the room, I would like to shed some light on this overarching question of can corporate capitalism and a habitable planet coexist from the food side. And forgive me when I start with an example of what happens when high technology meets amateurs, but the barge you can hardly see here was by far the biggest I have ever seen in my life. And I spotted it during our wonderful dinner party on the Mississippi River in Memphis earlier this week. And it reminds us that among the many superlatives of the Mississippi River, this river is also transporting the largest amount of agricultural products any river in the world does. However, only a very small fraction of the millions of tons of soybeans, of corn, of wheat actually feed people. The majority feeds animals, goes into high fructose sugar refineries, goes into so-called biofuels and many other industrial uses. And that is the global picture. When we look out here, it's the extreme, but also in the global perspective, less than 50% of all the grain that is yielded this year actually will feed people. For oilseeds, this food-non-food ratio will be even heavier. And that happens at a time where more people go to bed hungry than ever before on this planet. Over 1 billion, the majority women and children. About the same number of people as suffer from hunger actually today suffer from obesity. The WHO put out these figures, and it is a level of overnutrition that will most likely cause them serious and avoidable health problems such as diabetes, heart disease, vascular diseases. And yet another billion people suffer from different forms of malnutrition, such as micronutrient deficiency. So all in all, nearly half of the world's population today has a serious nutrition problem. Agricultural output, on the other side, not only in absolute terms, but also per capita of the 6.7 billion people we are on this planet at the moment, has never before been as high as today. When properly managed and distributed, it could not only provide healthy food for the present population of this planet, but even for the 9 billion Earthlings we will probably be by the year 2050, and which is expected to be around the peak of population growth. Still, agricultural experts tell us today, will tell us next month when the food summit in Rome will be held, that the global agricultural production must increase by another 70% by the year 2050 in order to feed the world. Is this possible? Is this feasible? Is this realistic, or is that cynical? About a month ago, a group of eminent scientists, and some of you may probably have seen this already, have suggested in Nature a new concept of looking at the boundaries of our planet, which we have been discussing quite a bit over the past days. They identified 10 vital areas of geophysical and geobiological significance, where they suggest that humanity has to stay within certain boundaries in order to maintain the stable and, for our civilizations, highly beneficial geological age of the Holocene. The scientists actually claim that now we have entered the era of the Anthropocene, and they define it as human actions have become the main driver of global environmental change. In order to maintain the stable conditions of the Holocene, you can see here they have tried to shape a green dot in the middle of this graph, and then they have come up with these 10 different vital circles, and you can see that on the top, climate change is already exceeding the green, safe operating space. You can also see that the nitrogen and phosphorus cycle have by far exceeded the safe operating space, and obviously the loss of biodiversity, which is unprecedented over many geological eras, has by far exceeded this safe operating space. What I find interesting is that when you look at all the 10 different cycles, subsystems as they call it, you will see that each and every one of them is primarily determined by the way we feed ourselves and the way we do agriculture. And when we look at one aspect, which is climate change, you probably all are familiar with this famous graph of the IPCC, which tries to show which sector contributes how much to global warming and greenhouse gas emissions. And there you see 14% of agriculture. So it looks like agriculture is but one of many contributors to climate change. You can look at it slightly differently, and that is to assume that the change of land use, deforestation, is mainly driven by agricultural purposes and by the way we eat. We've heard a wonderful presentation of how that happens this morning. And also, you can take into account in all the other shares the amount of energy that goes into the transport, the processing, the packaging, the distribution, the heating and cooling, the home preparation, and finally the waste disposal of our food. And then you will arrive at a figure which says about 40% of the entire global warming gases emitted are caused by agriculture and our food system. Now, we all have learned that we have to reduce climate gas emissions by about 80% in the industrialized world over the next couple of decades in order to have a good chance to keep the Anthropocene in the Holocene performance. What does that mean? That means that we will have to feed, this is the global perspective, feed 9 billion people with a fifth of the emissions that we are using today in agriculture and in our food system. There are another few boundaries that agriculture and our way we feed ourselves have really exceeded what is bearable, and one is the nitrogen and phosphorus use. The 2.5-fold increase of agricultural production over the past 40 years has actually come at the expense of more than an 8-fold increase of nitrogen use, and also at a substantial increase of phosphorus that you can see, which is the green line, and an even higher increase, obviously, of pesticide use. The Mississippi Delta, the dead zone in the Gulf, is a vivid example of what the scientists are warning of. Nitrogen can kill our aquatic life. We have to reduce it by magnitudes. How do we do this? Well, the first picture, which adds to the grim perspective on one side, but also gives hope, is this one. It's a figure by the United Nations Environmental Program, which calculates that on average, on global average, about 57% actually, of the calories we are presently yielding in the field are lost on the way to our table. Their calculation is 4,600 calories harvested, a loss of 600 calories due to harvest losses. A good example is India and many other countries where up to 40% actually of cereal production are rotting after harvest. Then the biggest chunk is the conversion of cereals to animal feed. It accounts for roughly 1,200 kilocalories of the initial 4,600. And the last piece is the losses at the distribution from the processing to the consumers. It is estimated that up to 50% of all the food produced in this God's own country is actually thrown away. And in Europe, where I come from, the estimates are between 30 and 40%. We're not doing much better. And the final important aspect to this is that the yield gap of small farms in Africa especially is estimated to range between 100 and 500%, which means this could be harvested with present technologies and methods, no silver bullet, GMO technologies needed, less fertilizer needed than usually applied on an acre here, if the full potential was to be used. So here I would like to show you some hints of how we can go about to meet this challenge. I would like to now come to a few personal considerations with regard to the initial question of how could an inhabitable world coexist with corporate capitalism. And I would like to start with the question of growth. I think there is a fundamental difference between the present economic concept of growth and natural growth. And I would call the natural concept of growth the search for an ecological optimum, using the given space and resources best, while the capitalist, the market-driven concept of growth clearly is one of the bigger, the better. There is a commandment. In order to stay on the market, you have to outcompete. You have to grow. You have to produce more and more. I think here is one of the most fundamental problems of value in the double sense that we have to address if we want to come further with this. The second, closely related to this concept of the bigger, the better, is the faster, the better. Obviously, a key to linear growth is the speed of turnaround, but it also entails an industrial concept of product innovation. The newer, the better. Natural systems seem to rather reward the timeliness of action. This can be seconds, these can be millennia. In the natural economy of change, nothing happens faster than necessary, and no proven technology will change without good reason. It also tends to constantly improve rather than constantly reinvent itself. A third consideration I have is, I would entitle monoculture versus diversity. From the economic perspective, the most competitive solution tends to outcompete all other concepts, and solutions at a given time and market therefore tend to be monocultural. We have monocultures of farming methods, of products, even of science and thinking and perception, therefore. Conversely, the law of evolution actually secures not just the survival of the fittest, but rather the survival of all fit enough. As it adapts to different environments, it tends to promote a diversity of solutions, branching out to ever more diverse adaptive processes. And the fourth aspect I see to our question is the one of control versus evolution, or top-down versus bottom-up. Economies of scale require standardization. Corporate control therefore tends to create enormously complicated, not necessarily complex, but complicated hierarchical systems in order to tailor small units to the need of the overall operation. The bigger these systems, the more efforts are required to prevent failure, error, and deviation. Nothing must go wrong in high energy, high speed, and high risk global production, distribution, and communication system. You all can think of the various mega systems we depend upon now that simply must not go wrong. Conversely, error, deviation, and the resulting diversity are the creative and adaptive forces of evolution. Starting from small differences at the DNA level and employing sexual reproduction, or call it love, as a congenial concept to expand such differences and diversity. Diversity is probably the most important and best proven technology of constant change and adaptation since roughly 4 billion years. Natural systems tend to be based upon the resilience of small self-sufficient units, branching out and form higher complexities based upon synergy and cooperation in addition to competition. Among the most worrying results of this top-down and you must control concepts are the enormous efforts in agriculture, science, and technology to fully control, circumvene, and ultimately stop this reproductive innovation processes. When you look, it started off with hybrid seeds that the farmers can no longer reproduce and adapt to their local environment. We now have this dream of the Terminator seeds, where the company controls whether this seed can reproduce or not. The entire concept of genetic engineering, of GMOs, basically is an attempt to circumvene the evolutionary reproduction proven technology of nature. We can do better. We snip it out, we put it in, the faster, the better. All in all, I think the contradiction we are facing is more versus enough. Economic survival depends upon the ability to produce and sell more. planetary survival depends upon the dynamic equilibrium of providing and recognizing what is enough. This applies to our personal nutrition as well as to local and global food systems, and it results in two different efficiency equations. The one efficiency equation asks, how can I get the maximum economic return of a given investment in a given piece of land? This results under present market conditions, at present oil prices and so on and so forth, in monocultures. The sustainability equation asks how can I get the optimal nutritional output with minimal external input out of a given plot of land. The simplified iconic solution of the first equations are monocultures and maximum value added per calorie intake. This drives the agricultural systems around the Mississippi. It also drives most of the big agriculture in Brazil and Argentina. It drives the landless animal factories around the world. As a result, and at this point of market development, the oil price determines the price of food and even starts to determine the price of land. The simplified solution of the equation of the second equation I presented to you is actually a garden. There is no more food efficient way to cultivate a plot of land than employing the only resource input that we have and will have in abundant excess in the future, and that is solar energy and human labor, ingenuity, culture, and pleasure. If you look at the food efficiency of a garden, nothing can outcompete this with respect to a given piece of land and given amount of resources. Just imagine for a visionary moment gardens and small plots all along the shores of the mighty Mississippi, and the shores of the rivers flowing into it, reaching deep into the suburbs and neighborhoods of the cities. This may be a distant dream, but where hunger strikes hardest today in Asia and Africa, the average farm size is actually 1.6 hectares or 4 acres. 85% of all farms on Earth are smaller than 2 hectares. And 2.6 billion people, 40% of the world's population, make their living from agriculture, and over 70% of the hungry live in the countryside. Here is where the garden can strike. And these are the countries where the majority of the farmers today live. And these are also the countries where the majority of undernourished people today live. The means of such progress are at hand. Mixed farming and agroforestry, a key to water management and climate adaptation as well. Healthy numbers of animals for food, manure, labor and waste conversion, local fish ponds, composting of organic waste, simple means of storage and transport to the next markets. All these highly efficient technologies are at hand, though they can and have to be substantially improved, shared, and adapted to new challenges. The social innovations required are well known. The traditional and indigenous knowledge and seeds are still there. The diversity of plants and varieties is still around. Water, harvesting, local irrigation systems and substitutes for firewood, biological pest control and organic soil fertility improvement. These are the real technological challenges of feeding the world tomorrow and today. I learned a lot about this from Mr. Phanom Korn Namchan of Meta in the north of Thailand, where he farms a plot of 1 acre. On this 1 acre, Mr. Namchan grows 70 different plant species. Herbs, fruits, vegetables, some rice. He also keeps a dozen of chicken, and he even has a cow and a calf, which is especially important for fertilizer supply. He sustains a family of 4 and makes the necessary surplus to send his daughters to school, pay the doctor, save some money, and even share an SUV with the rest of the cooperative he works in. They sell their produce on the local market and export dried fruit and baby corn to an organic trader for international trade. Let me show you a little more of Mr. Namchan's garden. And this is his community. There you see the SUV, and most importantly, this community, this cooperative also now manages the entire watershed of the area and makes sure that the water availability, but their main problem is pesticide pollution of the watershed, is actually controlled by the community. And the water is treated as a commons and not as the private property of any single partner in this. Mr. Namchan had previously grown corn as a contract farmer. He didn't manage to make a decent living. He had to go to the city nearby, Chiang Mai, tried to get a job there, and then he came back and started this business. And he said the biggest challenge is not the technology. The biggest challenge is the change at your heart. You have to feel what is right in terms of agriculture. The rest comes on its own, he claims. And I've seen this in many other farms as part of a highly interesting international assessment of agricultural knowledge, science, and technology for development, which had been initiated by all the respective UN agencies, FAO, WHO, UNDP, and you name it, and the World Bank, and has ultimately been signed last year by 58 governments. And it has been prepared by 500 scientists and experts, including holders of traditional and local and indigenous knowledge, that had been selected by a multi-stakeholder bureau. That was my entry into the whole thing. I was to represent NGOs, while also Syngenta was represented there and many other organizations. It was a 5-year process, and the scientists produced a global and 5 regional reports, altogether roughly 2,000 pages. And one of the key messages of this entire IASTD, I would love to talk much longer about, but not today, is the multifunctionality of agriculture is actually what we have to take into account, or as the general yesterday said, we have come to think in systems, not just in projects. And the message of the IASTD is you have to look at food production as the center of the entire economic, social, and environmental context of it, else you will fail to achieve
Benedict,
sustainable concepts.
Can I just say
And
thank
I'll-
you? Our
Oh,
Vandana,
Vandana, you're leaving.
So let's
Hey,
give her
take
applause.
care.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry, my fault. This is also my nearly last picture. The IASTD also presented this concept of multifunctionality in the language of the Andean cosmovision. The Andean cosmovision has this concept of multifunctionality as the interaction of the communities of nature, the communities of humans, and the communities of gods and deities. And only when they are in a constant exchange and understanding, when all of these communities have their right in the production process of food, will there be a sustainable future. and that is the cosmovision and the world order, which is actually not very different from enlightened scientific consensus today. So I think there is hope. We can actually come to this enormous challenge. I think multifunctionality is probably rather a female concept than a male concept. It is the multitasking, it is the bringing the things together, and therefore I think this is the appropriate expression for it. And yes, we males can probably also help a little bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.